ahead, please. I understand Dr. Walishine,
Yes.
his guests, right?
Yes,
Okay.
all of them.
So would you kindly introduce them briefly, please?
I think you've met Mr. Miscari and the daughter, my daughter's wedding.
Uh-huh. Oh yes, quite right, yes.
And then we have...
We did have.
He's coming. He's our technician. He makes 4 seats for us. That's his ready wine.
Right.
And Miss Upson and Miss Abby Jenkins. They are long-standing patients.
And that's one family, 3 of you.
Yes.
That's right, yes. So shall we begin with the beginning?
Yes, please.
Yes, Your Highness. I would like to ask that your community apparently is being persecuted in Pakistan. Can you tell me what this is?
You mean the details of persecution or the reasons of persecution?
Or the reasons for it?
Because the detail is spread over last 100 years, in fact.
Yes.
More than that. The persecution, in fact, is not just confined to Pakistan. So to find reason, you have to go back into the history. The only difference between the persecution in Pakistan and elsewhere in the world, and also throughout the long history of Ahmadiyyat, the difference between the Pakistani persecution and the rest, is that in Pakistan the persecution has been legalized. It has become a part of the constitution of Pakistan. It has been legislated into the legislation of Pakistan so that any persecution of Ahmadis is now legalized. Even a man can murder an Ahmadi in Pakistan claiming that he insulted the holy prophet of Islam, and his word will be taken as that. So this is the most conspicuous feature of Pakistan persecution in Pakistan, which differentiates it from the rest. The reason of persecution is exactly the same as that of the persecution of early Christians. Why was Jesus, peace be upon him, persecuted at all? His message was not a violent message of rebellion and chaos and disorder. That was the most peaceful message that the Judaic world had ever heard. And yet he was persecuted. So there is another enigma. Why was Jesus Christ persecuted, and why his followers, who gave no cause to offense, no cause of offense, and just innocent people who were always on the receiving end of injustice. What made the whole society, Judaic society, mad about them? That is the enigma which has to be solved. But then again, it is not confined to Jesus alone. It happens in case of every prophet of God. You look at that as a singular event because you consider Jesus to be a singular event in history of no comparison elsewhere. But we look at that in the overall history of those who came from God. And as such, it remains no enigma. It is a must for those who raise their voice in the name of God and deliver a divine message. Why was Abraham persecuted? Why was Moses persecuted, and so on and so forth? So the answer is the same. So that shows that we fit into that history. And this is exactly what our claim is, right from the beginning, We have been the most peaceful movement in Islam because we do not believe in terrorism, we do not believe in the use of weapons for the sake of delivering message and so on and so forth. And we believe in perfect order and perfect obedience of the law where you live. So as we believe Islam to be universal, we understand that this has to be Islamic message, otherwise Islam's claim to be universal is just meaningless. It just cannot work. So unless it works with our view as we understand Islam, that wherever the Muslims, through conversions Muslims appear, they have to be the best citizens of the country in obedience, in respect of law, in their personal conduct and so on and so forth. So what is wrong with that message? Where is there something which could, play on the sensibilities of the people around and make them mad about us? There is nothing of that sort. Only common thing is that we belong to God, and it was a message delivered to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian by God himself. So despite his own personal excellent conduct, he never broke law of the land in any sense of the word, who never told a lie, he never committed any sin against man, not to consider God. I mean, that is something else. Never in his history of 40 years before he claimed to be the Prophet of Allah. And the whole society considered him to be the very best among them, including Hindus, Sikhs who were not Muslims, who lived around Qadian and in Qadian, apart from the Muslim community. So that history puts him in the bracket of all the large history of those messengers or those who were not law-bearing prophets, but brought a message from God, which was not the law. So he is bracketed among those, and this is exactly what we believe him to be.
Thanks so much.
Yes?
Yes, I'd like to know. I don't understand your religion, but I would like to know why it's permitted for a man to take another wife should he choose to do so, but it isn't permissible for a wife to take on another husband.
Very good question. But first of all, tell me, why can't you understand our religion? If you can understand Christianity, you should understand our religion as well.
I haven't taken the trouble to understand
that's
the
right,
religion.
yes.
I mean,
So
there
that's
is,
a different story.
Yeah,
you
there's
should
so
say, I do
many
not know
religions.
anything of your religion.
I don't actually understand
That's right.
your religion.
No, when you have not attempted to understand, how can you say you do not understand?
No, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
What you should say is, I have not been able to study your religion, so I don't know much about it. There's nothing to understand when there is no knowledge, right?
That's right. Yes.
The only thing
stand
you know
corrected.
it creates a negative impression when you say, I do not understand your religion. It means you have made an attempt, sincere attempt to understand, and yet you have failed. So if I let this question unchallenged, go unchallenged, this will be an impression created on all the viewers. I understand you very well. What you meant was, you have not had time to read much about my religion, so you don't know anything much. But this much you know, that Islam permits more than one wife, and permits man to marry 2 times, 3 times, if necessary, under certain conditions, of course. Yet it does not permit women to marry simultaneously more than one husband. Where that is, allows polygamy, but it does not allow polyandry. Correct?
Correct.
Right, okay. First of all, it's an amazing question in a society where it is a two-way permission by the whole society. The only objection is that you should not legalize it. Living with others while you are married, which is adultery, has become a commonplace thing. Only the society objects to it if it is known that it is happening also in the royal palaces. Otherwise, it's okay. It is shown daily on television, in the program of Vanessa and this and that, but what is shown is less than the tip of the iceberg. What is happening is far more. So it's a strange question. While in a society where everything is permissible, more than 4 wives are practically taken as mistresses, and more than one husband are related with, because the disease pattern tells us this is happening. And I have not read any records as published by the British researchers, but I have read records published by the American researchers in tracing the history of herpes, which is related with sex. There are 2 types, many types, but 2 types largely. One sex-related herpes and the other normal, ordinary herpes. This sex-related herpes is the most dangerous thing to happen because it is never cured. Whatever you may do, you may inundate a patient with antibiotics, but it's cured and it comes back. So this has become the curse of the American society now, that they have to bargain in pursuit of pleasure for herpes as well, and the punishment comes along with the pleasure. Now they started seriously tracing how the course of herpes, how it spreads, and sometimes they reach the same person after making 100 steps around. The full circle got completed in 100 links, and back it came to the same person. And although the research was not meant to disclose what was happening under the surface of sexual relationship, only it was to pursue why herpes is spreading so fast and why the doctors cannot do anything about it. So that's what I mean. There is a duality in attitudes, which I wanted to point out. What the women object is not their husband's relationship or their relationship with others. What in fact they object is to share the legal rights with another woman. And what they hate is responsibility, in fact. What Islam has permitted is a very different thing with a different attitude. Islam permits man to marry under circumstances which have been mentioned in the Holy Quran. And by that example, they can be extended to other such situations where it not only becomes permissible, but it becomes necessary for the benefit of the whole society. This injunction in the Holy Quran, which you mentioned without referring to it, is found in a situation where war had diminished the number of males in the society and increased to a large degree the number of females, where orphans became problems, where orphan girls in particular posed serious threat to the society because there were no homes for people like these, unprotected children, etc., and they had to be distributed to the kindlier families for the upbringing and taking all care of them. Now there was the grave danger of society becoming corrupt, and the whole effort of Islam to purify the society and cleanse it of all the sinful tendencies would have been negated because of this. So the Holy Quran says, if they are orphans and you must take care of them, one way, I mean, this doesn't say one way, but it says you can in that case marry. But before that, I almost forgot, it has come back to me now. Before this permission, it says, if you are afraid of some sort of injustice to the orphans left in the care of the whole society. Then the solution would also be that you marry once, not only once, but twice, 3 times, or 4 times. But provided you can keep absolute justice. If you cannot, then you are not permitted to have more than one wife. So this permission is sandwiched with 2 very important conditions: justice in the beginning and justice in the end. If justice is endangered rather than being helped by this act, then you are not permitted. So justice, to keep justice between 2 wives is a very grave responsibility. Very few people can actually do this. So while some people exploit this situation to their advantage, but who in the human society does not so if he can? So exploitation does not transfer the burden or responsibility to the injunction, which is very meaningful and purposeful and which is essential as well under such circumstances. But just a minute, I have yet not answered your question about women not being permitted. Women are not permitted for many obvious reasons. First of all, it's impossible to permit both men and women to marry more than once. Now imagine a man having married 3 other wives and all 4 being permitted to marry 3 times again, and all the new husbands being permitted to marry 3 times again, and all the new wives being permitted to marry 3 times again. What sort of family that would become?
Everybody be married to each other completely.
Of course. And the prevention of disease, sex-related disease, which is also one of the purposes of institutionalized sex, as they call it, will be completely, destroyed. And again, whose children would those be? You see, these highly sophisticated tests, exactly pinpointing the child to belong to that person, are not available all over the world, and they are not available in every age. So who would be responsible for which child? So it is something which is impossible. See? Thank you.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Any other question?
I would like to know why Muslim men and women don't pray together in the mosque.
Don't pray. Haven't you already noticed? Enough damage is done when you go to churches together, and instead of worshipping God, you begin to look at each other.
No.
I can tell you from your own, record of fictional novels, etc., that the very churches have been made the seats of lovemaking instead. Because women, when they go to churches, see to it that they're absolutely adorned and decorated, and they look as best as possibly they can. So the men also become conscious of their responsibilities, not to God as much as to women who go there. And it's a strange sort of socializing event rather than real dedication to the worship of God. Distraction must be avoided. This is Islamic principle. If you want to worship God, you should go to God in a way where your attention is drawn completely, entirely to God, and there is no distraction. That is why there are no pictures, no tinted glasses in our mosques, just a simple, plain, neat and clean hall where your concentration is not disturbed. But next to you, if there is a girl sitting, and every man does not have a pure heart. That is why people go to the mosque, to gain purity. But they go with diseased hearts as well. This is something you cannot ignore and deny. So it would become a strange sort of worship a girl sitting next to you, shoulder to shoulder, or a woman and this and that, and or a man in case of ladies, who could be a bad man. The Holy Quran not only lays emphasis on cleanliness of body, but also cleanliness of heart and purification of your intentions and attentions, both. And this is why it suggests that it's better to keep company of the pious people with holy hearts and holy views in their minds, because according to Islam, this telepathic influence is recognized. If you stand next to a holy person with concentration upon God, it's quite likely that you also start running in the same gear of thinking and thoughts of Allah. So these are the major reasons why separation is very strongly advised, but not necessarily separation of the wholes. Islam does not make it essential for the Muslim society to make separate mosques for women and men. Preferably, if a separate section of the hall is preserved for ladies with some screen in between, that serves the purpose, and this is what is most often done by Ahmadis. Secondly, if a separate hall adjacent to the mosque is made with separate entry, etc., it would still be more advantageous, but they would join the same congregation under the same imam and exactly do what men do in their section. Thirdly, in the beginning of Islam, no separate halls were built at all. What happened was, women were expected to stay behind, men were expected to be in the front, and that had its own definite advantages, because in Islam, women are supposed to have a better control and command over their emotions than men. So it is men who are possible danger, who pose possible danger to women. That is why women are advised to protect themselves, take all measures of necessary protection.
I agree with that.
Right, this is true. So Islam says men should stand in front. If women stood in front,
The men could see them.
and men could see them moving and doing this and that, God bless those men, you know. So this is what happened in olden times. Please.
Christianity teaches love, peace, love your neighbor. And listen to you just now. You're saying that the Quran teaches love, love your thing. Now, can you define to me, therefore, then what is the difference between Islam and
You see, the fundamentals are exactly the same in every religion. The difference is only man-made. Though it is the claim of the Holy Quran that the teachings from God had to be basically the same. If not, then there is no God. If not, then either there are so many gods, hundreds of them, or it's just an imagination of man that they have built gods. If there is one God, it's impossible for that one God to either choose one people of a certain region for delivering the message and forget about the rest of the world, or confine himself to any single age, or, as a third option, the question which we have raised, to deliver different messages to different people and different ages, different in fundamentals. So if you understand the Quranic philosophy in this regard, then everything falls into the right places in jigsaw puzzle-like things, you know. According to the Holy Quran, Deen-e-Qayyama is that fundamental structure of religion on which all religions are built equally. That basic fundamental design has always been the same since the time of Adam till the end of the day. No change. The fundamentals are, you must purify yourself to the Creator and dedicate your worship to none other but the one single Creator. That is the first message which, according to the Holy Quran, was delivered to the whole mankind through messengers. The second thing is to be kind to your fellow human beings and to spend in the cause of God, which ultimately is spent on the poor as well. So, first of all, purification of your intention towards God. Secondly, dedicating your worship to none other but God. Thirdly, to spend in the cause of humanity and have the best relationship with the fellow human beings. These are the messages which were given to all messengers who brought a law from God or did not bring a law but were sent by God to rectify the society. Now, differences according to the Quran were built and made and built by two factors in human psyche. Number one, when the messages remained pure and intact, but people started becoming corrupt within themselves. When the so-called learned scholars of religion, call them priests or mullahs, whatever name you call them by, the religious leadership in a religion becomes corrupt within, and it becomes sort of arrogant basically, but verbally they do the lip service to religion. Within there is nothing. So such a society always begins to twist the message. In the beginning, they misinterpret the message to their advantage. In the end, this this audacity on their part permits them to change the word of God as well, or misplace it, pick it from here and add it there, only to serve their own personal advantages. But this does not happen in that area alone. It happens in another way as well. According to the Quran, such people begin to hold certain following from a religion as their personal territory. Some others have their following, confined to a certain area, and they would not permit the transfer of this territory from one to the other. The result is that dogmatic differences begin to appear and draw lines of boundaries between the followers of the same religion. This is the ultimate destructive process. When it begins to happen, then what actually is happening to the society is that demigods are appearing and God is thrown overboard, because they do not care for peoples belonging to God, they care for people belonging to them, the leadership. So the proof is that whenever they see an evil spreading in the society, they never take a joint action. They are not unfurled, they are not at all disturbed when they see evil spreading in the society, lies, misappropriation of others' properties and this and that. They keep their peace. But when one of theirs, that is their belonging, their trademark, goes from them to another of the same religion but of a different trademark, then they lose their tempers. Then they preach violence against such people. They say, we will not permit you to do this. And this has been witnessed throughout the history of Christianity as nowhere else with such intensity. It's a different time we are sharing now. Your focus of attention has become Islam and terrorism in Islam and intolerance in Islam. But you have left behind a history to which you have turned your backs. So you don't know that Christianity passed through much worse periods of intoleration and intolerance of disagreement in dogmas and beliefs. So hundreds of thousands of Christians belonging to other faiths were persecuted most severely, even to the level of beastliness, by Roman Catholics of Spain and also elsewhere in Europe, and the vice versa also happened at times. So this is how the differences appear. What you should look for is the commonality, and if you emphasize the commonality of goodness in every religion, then religions will become a source of unification rather than separation of society which hates each other in the name of God. The first thing that can happen to man is to hate in the name of God. In the name of politics is bad enough. In the name of other differences, economic differences, yes, it's not good. But to hate in the name of God is like to spread darkness in the name of the sun. In the name of light, spread darkness. It's the ugliness personified. So that is why Ahmadiyya would not suffer this. Ahmadiyya would not tolerate or support in any way such an attitude. Our motto, which has emerged during the time of my predecessor, is love for all, hatred for none. This is the beginning of the journey, and we must maintain it to the end. And as such, the differences would always be man-made in these areas. But there are other differences, God-made differences. Why? What is the logic of those? This is the second part of the question. You did not put it into two sections, but I know I have been, answering such questions. I have departmentalized them already. If this is it, then all right. Is there no difference between one religion and another? Why change the law? This question has also been addressed and satisfactorily answered by the Holy Quran. It says that those prophets or messengers who came in a certain age, they were given teachings by God in relation to the understanding of the man of that age. Number one. Number two, they were either original prophets or came to a certain people as such. And their values, their cultures, their historical role they were playing, they required a certain particular specific teaching. So apart from the fundamentals being exactly the same, the buildings which arose over those fundamentals began to differ in their structure, in their design. But the designs were not substantial changes were not substantial. Like you give different architectural touches to this building and to another, which are very good, which go according to the taste of the people. So Islam has given many examples, the Holy Quran I mean, of such changes which were brought about for the necessity, which were dictated by the necessity of the time and the necessity of a particular situation of a people. And they do not demand a different author to be the author of that religion where differences are not fundamental. Right? Please.
My question's in a slightly different vein. I'd like to know your views on whether you feel capital punishment should be reintroduced to Great Britain, certainly in view of the...
My answer should be not addressed only to... did you finish the question or
Pardon?
did I interfere? Had you finished the question before I started?
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Sorry. As many a time I hear these questions, so sometimes I seem to be impatient. But I'm not impatient. I want to save time. I know that this is what is coming. So right in the beginning, I understand, and I seem to interfere. But I have got your question very clearly. First of all, I should not give an answer which should be applicable to the British only, the British situation only. I belong to Islam, which claims to be a universal religion, which claims that its teachings are rooted in human psyche. So my answer should be, in principle, applicable to all the various societies of the world. And Islam has already provided an answer which is very comprehensive. According to Islam, capital punishment can be given and can be avoided as well. But the decision will not be taken by the impersonal judge or a system of justice who have not lost a dear one. The decision in this case would be taken only by those who have suffered because of the act of murder. So if the families of those who have lost a dear one do not want such a man to live, that man has already forfeited his life by taking unjustifiably, illegally the life of another one. So in Islam, this provision is made. If they say no, then the man must die. If they say yes, we do show compassion, the compassion will be taken into account. So I think these teachings cannot be improved upon. This is exactly the dilemma you are facing today. In the name of kindness, you are doing injustice to those who have suffered so much as they lost a dear one. Sometimes a young girl is raped and tortured to death. And the judge, simply sitting on his ivory tar chair, says, well, according to the law, this man should be punished to that degree and that degree. And capital punishment, no question. What about the trauma caused to the living ones? The trauma is not only inflicted on the dying person because he is no more. The real trauma is felt sometimes for lifelong, and the scars are never healed by those who love a particular person in their family or near ones. And they have to be taken into account by any law.
Yes.
Again, that's not the only thing. The other thing is Islam's principle of justice and forgiveness can be defined in a very short sentence. If you are wronged, you are permitted to take your revenge only to the degree that you are wronged. But if you forgive, you can only forgive if your forgiveness can promote reformation of the guilty, not otherwise. This is a very important principle which is applicable to all situations of families, homes, societies, and laws. If you forgive a criminal, even at home, like a child, when you know that your forgiveness will only encourage him to greater crime, then you are not doing justice either to yourself or to your child or to your society. So waman afa wa aslaha is the most essential condition laid by the Holy Quran. Whoever forgives, provided it promotes reformation, that is the best. Then Allah would love such a person. So permission for revenge is not withdrawn, it remains. But permission for forgiveness is conditioned on your assessment of the reaction. If you think the criminal would reform like some sensitive children, react much more favorably when they are not punished harshly, but when they are forgiven. And some children are so like hard nuts, they would not know the name of reformation at all. The more you forgive them, the more they will become dissident and obnoxious to the family and the society. So that means that you are releasing criminals in the streets, and the parents who did not follow this golden rule are responsible to the degree. If the society commits the same mistake as the parents did and blindly permits the murderer to live without judging going into the consequences of such act, without distinguishing between the acts of murder of one person and acts of murder of another, and just blindly dispensing all alike with life imprisonment, then will that help the society get rid of the murderers, or will it promote the act of murder itself? This can be discovered by the study of facts and figures which are compiled. And in case of England, I know for certain that ever since the capital punishment has been abolished, there are far more murderers on the street, in the street of England than ever before. The incidence of murder has increased. So you forgiveness at the cost of the innocent citizens. What right has a society to do that?
No, it's just that in this latest case that just come up today, this Nicole Roberts, the man that they'd taken in originally and accused of the murder has been released, and now they've got somebody else. Now, if at one time they'd all decided he was guilty by whatever means, he would have been executed.
Yes.
And now they have found the person, supposedly. I mean, is that right?
It is, such solitary exceptions cannot dictate the rules. You see, the rule is a higher principle. Human mistake is a common thing. But to that degree, people also suffer in imprisonment. I know some people were released from imprisonment, from belonging to IR or somewhere, who had spent the best 15 years of their life in the jail. When they came out, they were already broken pieces of human beings, not intact human beings anymore. And the life there afterwards was just purposeless, prolongation of torture. Was that not a punishment? Inflicted by human error, if not folly. So that element of error would naturally play its role in case of capital punishment as well. But for the sake of this error, you can't avoid the ugly consequences of withdrawing capital punishment from the society, as I have suggested some of them, but there could be many more. Right? Thank you.
Right, I've slightly changed my question since I've been here, Your Holiness. I was born into the Christian faith.
Yes.
Now, how does that compare with the mercy of Allah and the afterlife and a man's soul? Because I find that human beings are very fragile and we make lots of mistakes. How does Allah forgive this, what we do on earth?
Oh, this is a question which should have been addressed by a Muslim to a Christian. And for a Christian it is far more difficult to answer than for a Muslim. You know why? Because your philosophy of forgiveness is linked with inherited sin.
Yes, ours, you mean?
Yeah, that's what yes.
That's right. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Which means that every child born is a sinful child because one of his forefathers, or the very first, committed a crime. And the very the circumstances in which he committed a certain crime are far more understandable than the circumstances in which the future generations and progeny would continue to commit crimes. And in those circumstances, according to the biblical account, Adam repented and God forgave. Right or wrong?
Yes.
Right. So the person who had committed the sin was forgiven. The progeny which had not committed a sin was never forgiven. What sort of formula of justice and fair play that is? The very first person who committed a crime, he is forgiven and clean-sheeted by God. But his progeny bears the burden till the end of the time and comes out with much more heinous crimes because of that sin. In Islam, there is no room for such a philosophy of crime and punishment and reward and goodness and reward. According to the Holy Quran, every child is born innocent.
I see, it's born sinless.
Sinless.
Yes, yes, I see.
Every child is born sinless.
Yeah.
And one person's sin is never transferred through genes, etc., to another person. One person's disease can transfer, not his sin. So everybody born sinless and is given the same advantage as the rest of the society of people born anywhere else in the world or in any other age. Now, when they begin to commit crimes and they become sinful, there are so many factors responsible for that, but they cannot be absolved of their personal responsibility. Now, how can we understand how would God react to that? This is the question. Before telling you the Islamic teachings, I'll ask you to, explore within yourself and find how your nature would best react to such situations. Because only through this means you can somehow project yourself into God. Otherwise, God is far too rare and refined a thing for you to project into Him and think how He would react. So we can do it only through the reflective mirror of our own nature. Because both Christianity and Islam tell us that God made man into His own image.
Yeah, I didn't realise that Islam thought
That's right, yes.
Because I've never, like this lady said she didn't understand it, but you said to her, well, you've never studied it. Well, I've never studied it either.
Yes.
So there are lots of things, obviously, that I don't know about your
Yes,
teaching.
thank you. Now, according to this principle, when we come across crime, we know that when a crime is committed against us, we have the full right to forgive it. But when a crime is committed against someone else, we have no right to forgive that crime. That's the first principle born out of our self-study, introspective observation of how our nature reacts to such things. Secondly, when we forgive, and as I have already made clear, and we know that the forgiveness is going to reform and create a better man out of the criminal, then that forgiveness becomes our reward itself for the forgiveness. There is no better reward than the realization that I have helped and promoted goodness in the world. And then punishment would be a punishment to yourself, because a man who is so finely tuned as to be able to enjoy forgiveness, punishment is punishment for him in the first place. He would only punish when he is compelled to do that. He is only punish a good person with a finely tuned nature as he was born with, would only punish with a sense of suffering within him when he is compelled to do so, when there is no alternative. Now, according to this principle, Islam presents God as the proprietor and the creator of everything. So any crime committed anywhere can be forgiven by Him, because He is the overall master and sovereign of everything. But yes.
With our souls in afterlife, then where does forgiveness come
I'm
in?
I'll come to that.
It's very interesting.
I've got that in my mind,
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to finish this part and then I'll turn to that, yes.
Sorry. No.
According to Islam, God is the ultimate sovereign and proprietor. He is not referred to as sovereign alone, but as master and owner of everything. So He has the right to forgive without being asked why. Because if somebody has broken a piece of your jewelry or anything, or you can forgive, and you can. And nobody can ask you why. So nobody can ask God why He forgave, and He does not need any excuses for forgiveness. He does not hang on to, or should not hang on to any other excuses why I should forgive, but His ultimate wisdom. So in His forgiveness always lies within the forgiveness, underlying that forgiveness, some act of wisdom. His forgiveness will never contradict His wisdom. There is no loophole in this system of forgiveness in relation to God, and He does not require to sacrifice anyone else for the sake of gaining the power to forgive. You see, that is one thing very important. And then what about those who committed sins before Jesus Christ or elsewhere in the world, who never came to hear of Jesus and His sacrifices? How would they be forgiven by God, or will they never be forgiven by God? What happened to them and what would happen to them? So there has to be a universal instrument of forgiveness. And according to Islam, this is the universal instrument. God in His wisdom and God His compassion can dispose of these cases Himself. He does not require any foreign help from within or without, from within means a second person inside Him. So, but what happens to us when we sin? What happens to us when we are forgiven? And what is the soul?
Yes.
Now, this is an interrelated issue.
Yes, that's what I mean.
I'm coming to this. The point is that according to Islam, the soul within man differs from the ultimate life consciousness of other animals. The other animals have not developed to a degree where they can make conscious, responsible decisions between good and bad. Only humans can. Only human can think of entities far beyond them, forms of existence far beyond them. And only they are equipped with that refined thinking of understanding God and what is there to be, what is there in the form of angels and things, celestial things,
Yes, that's what
etc.
I mean.
Other animals cannot. So that is why, according to the Quran, only the souls of human beings have that potential to outlive their physical existence. And this is for a certain purpose. If they are made responsible for their acts, there has to be an afterlife where they will either be rewarded or punished by the crimes which are not forgiven. Now, according to Islam, forgiveness means a complete changeover in the life of the person who is forgiven by God. Some acts of forgiveness according to the Holy Quran are small human errors, small faltering here and there. That is not taken seriously into account. They are washed out automatically by the change of attitudes in the same person later on in life. Children make mistakes and teenagers make mistakes, but they sometimes grow into excellent citizens, very well behaved and courteous and responsible to the society in every respect. So those small marks of falterings do not change the style and nature of their souls. But anyone who lives in crime, with crime, that is an attitude within. Whether he is able to perpetrate all his vicious designs and desires, God knows that he is hurting his own soul. And that soul is developed as a blemished child develops within the mother's womb if he is diseased or she is diseased. Such a soul is born with those congenital marks of ugliness. And that is the hell which we create for ourselves. And if we nurture a soul in the ideal relationship between the man and God, the woman and God, human beings and God, and human beings and other human beings, then we deliver ultimately a very healthy soul. And before we die, we know whether we are hell-bound or heaven-bound. According to the Holy Quran, everyone at the time of his death, when he will review in a very short, quick review of what he has been doing, he will know that he is hellbound, or he will know that he will be forgiven. If he has been forgiving others, if he has been kind to the others, if he has been taking care of the destitute and the suffering, if he has made a genuine effort to be on the right side of God throughout his relationship, then the soul he is developing is like the child being developed healthily within the uterus of a mother. Then he will deliver a healthy soul. And the hell and heaven are born before the death of a person.
So we are conscious of it in a way.
You can. Some people live in absolute oblivion. I'm not talking of those. They don't care, they don't believe, so I'm not talking of those. But those who believe, who know their responsibility, they gradually become more and more conscious of either their evil or of their goodness. When they become conscious of goodness, they gain a contentment of heart which is unparalleled. They live in an eternal happiness, yet they suffer bodily sometimes, suffer in circumstances, but they are the most contented people on earth. And that is what the prophets of Allah are. Jesus suffered, people thought he suffered. Bodily he did, but he would never exchange his suffering for a bodily comfort, because then the situation of the heart would also be swapped into a different situation. Suffering can only be sustained, voluntary suffering I mean, if you are being rewarded constantly within yourself in exchange for your suffering. And only the superior consciousness of the reality of goodness can sustain you those periods of extreme suffering, that is bodily suffering, because within yourself you are witnessing, experiencing a sort of heaven being born and developed within you. Without that, suffering is meaningless. It has to be compulsory, otherwise it's meaningless. So this is how we deliver our souls, and our acts and attitudes towards God and His creation here on earth will help us deliver either a healthy soul and a happy soul, or an ugly and diseased soul. Now the heaven and hell are not just the consciousness of the soul. According to the Holy Quran, the soul is given a new body of the nature of soul's existence, and a much more refined soul is created out of the same body of the soul. So a healthy body requires a soul naturally, and because this body will no longer be valid there, no longer be of any practical purpose there, so whatever form of the soul is, we don't know, it is belongs to different dimensions, but it will have developed a soul from within. So
Nurtured here on earth in a
this,
way.
you see, within the nature of our soul which is delivered, will begin to change, occur some certain changes and developments will take place.
And are we're conscious of it in a way.
I'm complete.
Yeah, sorry.
The Holy Quran gives the example of the development of soul during this period between death and ultimate resurrection as that of an embryo's development within the uterus of a mother. So clearly, in such clear terms, the Holy Quran refers us to the study of what is happening within the uterus to understand how shall we be delivered ultimately. And now, in the beginning, the consciousness of the embryo is so vague that neither we can project ourselves into the embryonic stage to find out what is happening, what the embryo feels. nor we can project ourselves to the later middle stages of the embryonic development. But sometimes the mothers begin to have a feeling of the child's health and happiness, the way he's kicking around and, making a lot of noises within. And a diseased child always depresses the mother. And she goes under melancholy moods and falls under blues, and she doesn't know what's happening to her, and she doesn't feel comfortable bodily as well until either the doctors tell him through scanning or she delivers a diseased child. So according to the Holy Quran, the souls as are delivered here are not yet the perfected ultimate forms. Our consciousness, the level of consciousness at which we deliver them, will remain the same. But in comparison to the level of their consciousness, when they are delivered in the end, the difference will be as vast as the difference between the consciousness of an embryo and that of a delivered child. See? Because you are moving in the direction of God, and God is the ultimate of refinedness. You can never reach Him because it's limitless journey, but you can move in His direction. So that journey will become far more rarefied in its nature after the death, when we have delivered our souls. We may not care for it, but this is exactly what's going to happen. Or the entire exercise of the creation of man becomes meaningless and useless. People, hundreds of thousands, can run away with their crimes, such criminals as Hitlers and others, like Hannibal and so on, who committed vast crimes against large sections of society, would have been considered as having gone scot-free after the death. So the death begins their age of rest rather than their age of punishment. Thus doesn't bring their age of punishment because they know more. So there has to be some system like this, otherwise this whole exercise is meaningless. That is why the Holy Quran, this is the last, I think the time is over, which I'm going to add to your question is, add to my answer to your question is, that the Holy Quran reminds us that whatever you may think, one thing is certain, you are answerable. And those of the non-Muslims, whether they are Jews or Christians or belong to any other faith, if they genuinely believe in what they believe, provided they are conscious of their righteousness and provided that they know and realize they are answerable, such people, in whichever religion they are born, should not worry about their future. They will be rewarded by God and they will be taken good care of. So I think at that happy note we end this session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all coming
Thank
in.
you very much.
Very interesting sitting together. God bless you.
Thank you.